Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Weird shit you've seen. What kind of weird, unexplainable shit have you seen? Has anything totally out of the ordinary ever happened to you that you still can't decipher to this day?
This happened about 24-ish years ago, when I was 5 or 6 laying down with my head in my grandma's lap. I looked up at a doorway to a bedroom and saw a silhouette of a person that was like white noise but colored red instead. They didn't have any clear features, pretty much 2D, with the only feature being the white noise effect moving around them. I tried to point out to my grandma the silhouette man, but as I pointed, it turned to the side and walked behind the doorway. Confused, I got up and tried to find the silhouette man, but found nothing, nor a way it could have escaped so quickly. My grandma, confused, asked me what I saw, but at my young age and not really knowing how to describe white noise, described the mighty morphing Power Ranger transformation thing and a tall man, which probably confused her. She led me upstairs. My memory is getting a bit fussy as I really clearly remember the first one with clear detail, but I saw 3 others with the same silhouette, white noise body, just different colors, yellow, green, black. 2 of them didn't really react, just seemed to wander around, walking out of view. The last one did pause for a second and walked out of view much like the red one. I didn't see any more after that. From what I heard years later, my grandma was thoroughly scared shitless from the event, but my ignorant young self was just confused about what they were. It's also weird because it was in a suburban neighborhood close to a major city with no real history, and my grandparents were the original owners. So to me it wasn't ghosts, and in my whole life I have never had another experience like that. Pick sorta related to what I mean by red-white noise.
I saw 3 similar figures as a kid in my bedroom. 3 figures made from colored static. 1 red with a blue outline, 1 blue with a yellow outline, and 1 yellow with a red outline. Didn't look like humans though. They looked like flames and had facial features like a carved pumpkin. All 3 started taunting me menacingly in garbled language. I freaked out, but couldn't get out of my room as there was a child gate on my door. I start freaking out and scream for my parents, shaking the gate as hard as I can. They materialize on the other side of the gate to face me and continue their taunting. By the time they get up the stairs, these things dissipate into nothing. Still remember it vividly to this day, still gives me a sense of dread.
I got one. It happened about 3 years ago. Still not sure what to make of it, in my old house out in the country. I used my guest room for meditation, since it was rather empty. About an hour before sunset, I was on the bed meditating like every other night. All of a sudden, the room gets dark, and everything goes quiet. I go into a trance-like state and see something appear in the doorway to my right. The ceiling was about 10 feet in that house, and the thing was damn near close to it. It was black and scaly looking. It had red eyes and long horns. It had wings that were kind of wrapped around it. It started talking to me about why it was there, telepathically. As soon as he told me that I was in a field all of a sudden, it was dusk and the wind was blowing, and crickets were chirping. It was like I was there, but wasn't at the same time. I could only look up at the sky. From my left, a ring of fire was floating into view. From my right, some kind of symbol was coming into view. They eventually met in the middle and joined together. I woke up in cold sweats and didn't sleep, eat, or drink anything for a day or so. I can't remember the symbol for the life of me, but that isn't the first time I've seen whatever the shit that thing was.
It's kind of mild, but sometimes my mattress vibrates at night when I'm trying to go to sleep. It's odd. Anyone have any ideas? It's been happening for a long time, maybe around 9 years or so.
This happened to me as a kid. Just once though. I was trying to go to sleep when the mattress vibrated heavily, shrugged it off, then a few minutes later it happened again. Got kind of spooked but didn't really know what to do. After it happened a 3rd time, I got up and went to tell my mom. She got up with me, and we went out to the living room and put on the TV. I was laying beside her on the couch when the couch vibrated. I asked her if she felt it, and she said no and seemed confused. After that, I realized it was just me feeling it, so it couldn't be actually happening, and I decided to go back to bed. I think it happened again before I fell asleep, but I wasn't scared anymore? I'm not sure, but it's never happened again. Since my mom couldn't feel it, I assume it's gotta be something psychological. Sorry, I don't have any answers for you, Anon. Was just excited since I've also never heard anyone talk about this.
Not sure what you mean by shaking, but when you practice astral projection, you find just before your astral self jumps out of its body, you experience an unusual rocking sensation. Feels very much like the bed trying to shake you off. What's probably happening is you're beginning to fall asleep, but your mind is somewhat alert and you're feeling yourself about to rocket out of your body.
I think it could be many things. Some people say it is due to sleep paralysis or a related phenomenon or hypnagogia. Others have said that it's something to do with spirits trying to talk to you or something like that. I experience other forms of hypnagogia sometimes. Far less now, but I experienced it a lot a few years ago, like having somewhat vivid visual hallucinations before falling asleep, and sometimes after waking up, hypnopompia. It was a bit scary, but also quite fun. Sometimes I would see people and things standing in my gaping doorway immediately after opening my eyes, after having them closed even for only a moment when trying to go to sleep, only for them to fade away over the course of around a second or less. I also remember opening my eyes one time and seeing a Chinese lantern hanging from my door. I think once I also hallucinated a large spider, again for only a moment, of course. These hallucinations happened often. Those are just some of the examples I can remember. Well before this, like a couple of years before, I would have this recurring hallucination which was unlike any of these ones I would have in the years to come. Rather than being momentary and somewhat vivid, detailed and realistic like the others, it was solid and anchored in my perception, compared to the other ones which just evaporated in a moment. But perhaps as compensation for this, it was abstract and not very detailed or realistic looking like the others. It was this like pixelated pattern I would see on the bedroom door I can mainly see when going to sleep. I don't sleep with my door closed. The pattern was taller than it was wide. It was sort of transparent and orange. Imagine grayscale, but for the oranges of street lamps, in color. In the middle towards the top, it had the moon texture from Minecraft in this orange scale color. And I think maybe lines of the same color going down to the bottom, but it was somewhat random. And most importantly, each pixel would change in orange scale color and transparency gradually, like a slow breathing gradient animation, and independently, but not so as to destroy the image or make it unrecognizable. It was always the same image, even though it was dynamic. It would never move and would always be in the same spot on the door across the hall. This happened many times, and it was the same every time, but eventually it just stopped. Anyway, I digress. My dad thinks the vibrating is something to do with out-of-body experiences and/or astral projection. He had out-of-body experiences and experienced the same vibration phenomenon when he was a kid. I've never tried astral projection. I really know very little about it, but I want to try it for sure.
Be me 6 or 7 years old, visiting cousins in the countryside of Michoacan, Mexico. Whenever we'd go over there, my brother, cousins, and I would go hiking to the hills and forests early in the morning and be back before the sun went down. About 2 kilometers deep into the forest, all is green and brown. Out of the corner of my eye, I spot something. It looks like a medieval tower made from stones, about 9 meters tall, has a small tree growing on the side of it, a small hole for an entry, about 2 feet wide and tall. Doesn't have any windows or holes besides the entrance. The hole looks pitch black. Every single tree around the tower is taller than the tower and crooked. Tell cousins I want to get in it. They all tell me not to. Listen to them, because they know more than me about this zone. Say let's come back tomorrow with a flashlight to see inside of it. They agree. Head back home. The next day, I headed into the woods again with them because I wanted to see the tower one more time. Get to the place we saw it. Nothing is there. A patch of dirt in the middle of the crooked trees, and nothing else. We all headed back for the day, No one spoke a word about it the last week I was there. I think about it every now and then.
Lived in northern Indiana in Nowhereville. Half of it is forest and the other half is farm fields, driving with a few of my high school friends, summer after junior year. Late night on forested roads, come around a bend. Total daylight out of nowhere. We stop and just look out the windows confused as hell. Turn around and spend the rest of the night with the lights on in my friend's house. Another one, as is always driving with friends just fresh out of high school. Go out into the forested areas as usual. My friend's gotten a bit braver and takes his shitbox down gravel paths and dirt roads that barely qualify as roads now. We see figures darting back and forth as we're going along one. I don't think I've seen my friend drive in reverse that fast ever since. And one last one of my own, working a closing shift at my shit fast food job. Driving home at about 1 a.m., see a hunched-over human-type figure. Looks up at me with the most horrible face I'd ever seen. Every creepy old person's face ever combined couldn't compare to how disgusting and ugly and wrinkled this thing was. Floor it the rest of the way home. Don't even say goodnight to my parents. Just rush into my room and lock every entrance. I could always just be a schizo dumbass, but I've seen him one too many times to think so.
Was in some kind of cult when I was way younger. I saw many weird things, from dreams to hallucinations and sightings. Most notable experience was close to a lake. I had this weird gift when I was younger that I could tell things without knowing them. Let's call it a perfect intuition. For example, when trains depart, I would guess them near perfectly. The time. Kinda weird. Although you could write that off as having the subconscious breaking through. Me and my cult friends are close to a lake. One of the girl's sisters died long time ago. She was good friends with her, apart from being blood-related. We sit down on a bench and talk a bit about our experiences. She starts talking about her sister. She tells us that she's sitting on the opposite side of the lake. People start guessing things about her, the way she's sitting, etc. I was the only one who would guess right a lot of the times. Now the weird part comes. It's late and dark outside, so we decide to go for a walk to the nearby woods, hugging the lake. I walk in front of the group. I start seeing a silhouette. It's not dark. Now, this is really hard to describe as English is not my native language. The entity looked like a vicinity, with a translucent TV static inside. It just stood there. Didn't feel dangerous or anything. We continue the rest of our evening.
I've been cataloguing people's accounts of mysterious phenomena for some time, and I've noticed some patterns and distinct categories among them. Floating, robed entities are one of them. Witness 1 suddenly felt the urge to go home to make sure that his mother was safe. He got home and went to hang his winter gear by his window when he saw a massive hooded figure composed of tattered shadows floating down a sloping hill outside. It was blacker than the surrounding night and seemed to warp the space around it. It moved fluidly and with clear agency, floating like a squid through water. He then closed the shades and hid under his bed's blankets. The next day, he found out that a man had shot his girlfriend and then had committed self-termination nearby. Witness 2 was staying at her mother's house and she was up reading late at night. She then went out to the backyard to smoke. She had been sitting by the edge of a pond for about 10 minutes when for no reason she took her eyes off of the sky and focused on her neighbor's tree. About 2 seconds later, a floating, cloaked being emerged. It was completely black, with a hood that covered everything from its arms to its feet. Its body was just like a human's from what she could see. She was watching it from a single angle, so she never saw a face, and also couldn't see hands or feet. She guessed it to be about 5.5 feet in height, but it was hard to tell. It moved from the tree at a steady rate, around 2 miles per hour, and kept the same height until it neared the edge of the pond. Then it descended until it was about 15 feet above the pond and 50 feet from the edge. There it stopped movement, pixelated away, and was gone. Witness 3 was watching over his dogs in his backyard at 11 p.m. when he saw a fuzzy moving cloud in the shape of a man that was darker than its surroundings. It appeared to be 9 feet tall, its back was turned against him, and it was wearing a robe with a hood on. It turned its head to reveal an even darker shade of blackness where its face would have been. It lasted for about 5 seconds and finally disappeared when he blinked. Witness 4 was waiting outside of his school with his classmates when he suddenly noticed something from the corner of his eye and looked back. Behind the fence surrounding the schoolyard, in an adjacent backyard, he saw a white figure that was the size of an average adult but didn't seem to have any limbs. It was wearing what looked like a white hood or cape that surrounded the whole body. It didn't have sleeves, and probably had a zipper at the front where the buttons would be. It had a hood on, although it didn't seem to have a face. Witness described it as being just a floating hood and shirt similar to that of the Grim Reaper. It hovered by quickly, a foot or two above the ground, and in a few seconds it disappeared behind some hedges. As to what they are, I have no idea. I usually gravitate towards more skeptical approaches, like they're just a product of the person's mind, but even if it is so, there has to be a reason why so many people are seeing the same thing over and over again. This is why I'm starting to believe there's a sort of microcosm of archetypes in everyone's mind, which manifest themselves only on certain occasions.
You can add mine. 10-year-old me, maybe slightly older or younger. Tend to wake up late at night and then go back to sleep at this time in my life. Wake up as normal. At the end of my bed is a cloaked, translucent figure. It is a grainy white, almost like chalk on a black chalkboard. Can see straight through it. Opening of the hood where the face would be is blacker than black. Cannot be seen through. Its arms are crossed. Sleeves are interconnected. Hide under a blanket, it is thin, and I can see through it. Figure turns, floats to the corner of bed, stops, turns, floats to my side, stops, turns to face me. Eventually forced myself back to sleep. Maybe took 1 hour. No idea if it ever vanished. I was too scared to look. It glided smoothly. I couldn't see the lower half of its body, but I knew it wasn't walking.
Be me 3 years ago at 26 years old. Shoulder surgery in a small hospital. Anesthesia. Wake up in the recovery room. Intense nausea and hallucinations. Would throw up if I seated. Could see the room with closed eyes. See a river of souls. Brownish humanoid entities with no facial features and hair floating in line in front of me. Infinite flow of them going from right to left in rows of 5. Open my eyes, just see the room. Close my eyes, see the river. Goes on for about half an hour. One entity sits beside me looking at me. I wasn't scared and asked him what was happening. No response. Eventually they disappear. Still have visual distortion similar to LSD. Fire extinguisher breathes as it grows and shrinks. The same happens with the nurse's head. After an hour I feel normalish. No idea what happened and never knew what was in the anesthesia.
Yeah, and it happened quite recently. Sends shivers down my spine and get paranoid on occasions. Be me. Live at home with mom and lil bro. Cleaning the place, I had just finished the bedrooms. Walk out of my room, see mom walking out of her room into my bros across from her. I say to her, "It's all right, I've cleaned in there." She turns to me and just stares for a second, then goes into bro's room. Think to myself, odd, continue as normal. Go to the kitchen for a drink. Bro is sitting watching TV in the front room. Mom's standing in the kitchen making tea. "Wow, you're fast. I literally just watched you go into bro's room." She just looks at me. "Anon, I haven't been in his room since this morning." Freeze up. "Nah, I just watched you go in there." She then says, "What the hell are you talking about, Anon?" Now it's all on one floor, and my room is closest to the kitchen, meaning she would have had to sneak right by me on the way, which is impossible. Immediately run and check bro. He's still watching TV. Run to check all the bedrooms. Nothing. Not a fucking soul. Mom says I'm paranoid and then asked who I was talking to earlier. I don't know, man. That shit creeps me out. It doesn't even sound bad. But shit like this really gets me.
Be me, 10 years old during summertime. Find an old fountain pump, basin, and some tubing. Make a shitty water fountain with them. Put a shitty water fountain in an outdoor gazebo on a table. Leave the shitty fountain plugged in overnight. Come back to the gazebo the next day. Hear the pump grinding, like the water in the fountain went dry. Smells something god-awful. Really god-awful. To this day, one of the worst smells I have ever witnessed. Smells like the normal scent of decaying bodies, but mixed with an incredibly sweet candy-like scent. Almost vomit as I find the source of it. The water in the fountain is completely gone. In its place are dead insects. Literally thousands of them where the water would be. All flying insects, mainly flies but with some hornets and the like mixed in. Quite a wide variety. Removing any decorative rocks in the fountain's basin reveals a vat of dead insects a foot or so deep beneath them. End up throwing the shitty now insect-filled fountain in the woods and forgetting about it. I still have no idea why so many insects were attracted to it, and I never experienced anything else similar again.
Be Me Bong, 1995, so about 8 years old. Not long after Christmas, I think, but decorations were down, so maybe mid-late January time. Horrific nightmare about nuclear attack, very realistic. I dreamt I was in bed in my room, then awoke to a blinding flash, like someone suddenly holding fog lights to my eyes while they were closed. Felt the heat on my body. It was the weirdest sensation. Saw part of what I think was the mushroom cloud in the distance. Was at night, and there were no lights on anywhere, so it was hard to make out. I heard and felt a shockwave. A huge boom like a large door being slammed underground is the closest I've always been able to compare, but worse than you can imagine. Fire everywhere, trees, houses, cars, people screaming, shouting, going mental. Distant flashes and explosions while this happened lit up the sky, illuminated more clouds. Woke up screaming, felt sick, still felt the heat and ears hurt from noise in dream. Will never forget how vivid this dream was. Even thinking of the pain makes me shiver. Made me question reality. As a dream sounds like nothing, but I've never had anything that realistic since.
I've had similar dreams before. Every single one ending at the climax, though when the head and the shock wave would hit my face and I'd be dead. Had one dream over and over where I was falling down a cliff to a riverbed, another with a nuclear attack, and another with a random figure chasing me in a house and cornering me. The feeling I felt when I saw the missiles was despair, helplessness, a feeling of deep regret and failure, and finally, as the heat washed over me, a feeling of acceptance, as if I knew there was nothing I could do to stop what was coming for me.
So, this story, I barely remembered it because of the recurring dream. Around like 2006 or 2007, I got this dream. I'm in an alleyway. I don't recognize the alley, but I can describe it. The ground is cobblestone, the walls are about 3 stories high, painted tan, but show signs of being faded, and at the end of the alley is a doorway. The door is painted a dark red, and it looks very old. It's curved on top and has a gold knob. Now in the dream, I can't move, but I can't take my eyes off the door. I'm drawn to it for some reason, and then after like 5 minutes of just standing still looking at the door, I wake up. It never seemed significant, and I forgot about it for a while until around 2008 to 2009. My family is taking a trip to Mexico for family stuff, and we take a tour of the city while we're there. On the tour, we walk past an alley, and everything seems to go silent for me. The feeling comes over me that I need to go to the door, but my dad sees me wandering off and takes me away. The reason I remember it now is because I had the same exact dream as the first one recently. There's something deep down telling me there was something malevolent behind the door, and since I had the dream again, I don't know if something involving it will happen to me again. I know people have come across precognition in dreams, but I'm not sure if anyone knows what happened to me.
When I was around 6 years old, I had a strange dream. I sat up in bed and my toys were all on the floor twitching and spasming, while every wall, including the ceiling, had these images of a man spinning and dancing in a ballroom similar to the Pic. He was smiling and would sing in this weird yodeling fashion, but there was a shit ton of echo. All of a sudden, it started getting hotter. The toys were vibrating, and all of a sudden the man was staring at me from different angles while smiling. I don't remember waking up, but all of a sudden I was in my mum's arms and she said I was screaming my head off. My mum to this day swears I had a fever dream, but I don't understand because I know for a fact I went to school the next day. Also, my brother, who was in the bunk below me, said I never screamed and he's a really light sleeper. But it gets stranger still. I have had 2 near-death experiences since, almost drowned and seizure, and I don't see the white light I see in the hall, brightly lit and the singing echoes around me. My mum, when I started to talk about what I saw after the seizure, immediately stopped me after I described the ballroom. It flashes into my head every now and then.
I was a kid, so I admit I possibly misremembered or was tired and eyes playing tricks on me. I don't know. Was nighttime, still blue in the sky, about 9 p.m. in summer, looking out from my bedroom window on the 2nd floor. We lived rural, no neighbors, no back fence. I was looking at the trees in the backyard, wind moving the branches. So out of the corner of my eye, I see movement at ground level to my right. Happened too quickly and I couldn't make anything out. Kept eyes peeled. And then I saw a figure, about 6 foot. Featureless, but I suppose human shape. Just nothing definable. It moved glided at a real slow speed across the backyard. Maybe about 150 meters away. I'm not sure if it was touching the ground. I think it was hovering about a foot above it, but I can't be sure of that. White/gray color. Looked like a cloud, or gas. Moved at the same speed a person would if walking, and didn't seem to have any real purpose. Got the impression it was walking to go somewhere, but also veered a little in one and then another direction. Didn't seem aware of me at all. Saw it for maybe 30 seconds all up before it disappeared out of view behind a shed. My 10-year-old brain went crazy trying to figure it out. Felt chilling. Like it was something unfriendly that I shouldn't be seeing. That wouldn't want me to know it was there. I instantly thought of ghosts. Now I just don't know. I tell myself, swamp gas, ball lightning. Except these are things I've never encountered. Again, completely baffled by it.
When I was about 18 or 19, I experienced multiple bouts of sleep paralysis. For the sake of time, I'll only tell the 2 craziest. The first time was potentially the most terrifying, as you can imagine, having never dealt with it before. I was asleep, lying on my back in the pitch black of my room. I woke up to the sensation of someone sitting on top of me. I'm getting goosebumps as I write this, as it's so vivid still. From what I could feel, it was a person. That is, I could feel its legs on either side of me, straddling me. Its hands were on my shoulders. I don't recall it applying any pressure or actively holding me down, but it wasn't exactly unmenacing in this position. For whatever reason, call it confusion or being half asleep still, I reached up with the strength I could muster and felt its face. It didn't move as I ran my fingers across its nose and mouth and eyes, nor when I felt its forehead. This was the part that stuck with me the most, as it was the strangest comparatively. Its forehead protruded a substantial amount beyond the rest of its facial features. It was similar to that of a Neanderthal, but even that doesn't describe it. I'm not sure how I got out of the predicament, but as soon as I regained my senses and made the connection of what was going on, I made a beeline to the light switch across the room. Nothing was there when I turned back to my bed, now fully illuminated by the ceiling light. The next occurrence was similar. I awoke to find this thing on top of me, vaguely holding me down. However, I got a bit ballsy. I started punching it. I'm not normally an angry person, but I wasn't about to let this thing get the better of me again. I could feel its panic, quickly moving about, looking for a way out. It was then that it crawled upward and over my head, almost like a giant spider. It disappeared without hesitation into the wall at the head of my bed. Then I ran for the lights. Again, nothing. Both of these times, I always found myself in the same position before I could get up while it was happening, so I can very much say it wasn't just a vivid dream. I'm now 31. It's been 12 years since this happened. I've slept with a light on since.
I'd get sleep paralysis too, but when it happened, I could see the doorway open when I knew it was shut, and a black void beyond and a sense of dread that something was about to come through that doorway. The only thing that got me out of that nightmarish shit was my body reminding me I hadn't taken a breath for 60 seconds, and I actually woke up. Trips me out that I could see the room in perfect detail, even though my eyes were shut.
Farm life. Wake up at 3 a.m., exactly, and feel it's really cold, colder than winter, only it's June now. Look out of the window and see this dark figure just standing and staring at our house. Stare back horrified until it lets out this terrifying, demonic scream. Run to my mom and dad. They are awake too, just woken up by the scream. Cry like a child I am and tell Dad someone's standing in front of our house. Dad tells me to stay with my mom while he checks what's up. Mom and I went to the window and it's still there. Dad opens the front door and yells at it, stuff like, "Hey, who is it?" and threatens with cops. Figure suddenly sprints towards Dad and goes straight through him before disappearing into thin air. Dad looks behind him and everywhere, but it's gone. We call the cops, they check the places and take our story. The neighbors heard the scream too. The scariest thing is ever since that my dad has been acting weirdly, like his voice changing in the middle of conversations to this weird old man voice. And sometimes he just stares at people, just smiling with big scary grin, and doesn't remember doing that when we tell him about it. I'm sure some demon went through him back then.
2005. Neet always sneaked up the road to the golf club to scab ciggy butts from the ashtray at 2 a.m. once everyone had left. One night, knelt down to scab. See 3 bright red orbs in a triangular fashion at head height go bobbing along at head height past me and down the first fairway. I yelled out in shock, thinking it was a person holding something with lights on it. My jaw drops as it walks into the light and I see they are just floating on their own. Start rubbing my eyes, thinking I'm going crazy. Watch it for another 30 seconds go down the fairway before it disappears behind trees. Proceed to run home fast as fuck, boy. I like to think it was an extremely rare case of St. Elmo's fire, or I think I would go insane trying to rationalise what the fuck it actually was. Have an Aboriginal mate. Stay at his house one night. He lives in a small granny flat outside of his home. That day, he told me one of the foster children his mother looks after had tampered with his jar of sand from Uluru and then poured nail polish into it. Now, there's a dark stain on the roof where the child poured the sand. Think he's fucking with me, but nope, it's there. Once I notice it, tell them all to stop being dumbasses, it's just something on the light bulb. Start waving my hand around the bulb to show them. Shadow is still there. Just to mess with them, I try to jump up on the roof and hit it. It moves a foot away just as I'm about to touch it. What? I get a broomstick and slowly try to touch it again. It moves out of the way. We all freak out and go to sleep inside the house. Go in there next day and figure WTF this shadow is even coming from. Closing curtains, waving in front of mirrors, even taking the light bulb out to inspect it. Despite being the middle of the day, the shadow was still there and still moved if we tried to touch it. It stayed there for months before the house and flat burned down.
What?
Sand from Uluru is cursed. Shitloads of dumb tourists have taken it home only to have the worst year of their life, with bad luck, with most either mailing it back to the park or travelling up there again to deliver it back in person. Spoopy.
I grew up in a Victorian house over a century old. My family line has always lived there. It has never been inhabited by anyone who wasn't a blood relative. I would frequently hear screams and weird noises from the basement as a kid, but this can logically be explained away as raccoons or stray cats, or my own childish imagination. There's an antique music box in the guest bedroom that would sometimes play on its own, but this is something that occasionally happens with old music boxes, so nothing paranormal there. The one thing I can't logically explain is that the house phone would call my dad's cell any time we were gone on vacation. This happened multiple times, and my parents always laughed it off as the house missing us, so I didn't pay much attention as a kid. As an adult, it's kind of freaky. You could argue there was some weird technological problem, but this never happened when we were in town, only when we were away. On vacation, when Dad would answer the call, there was never anything on the other line. Just silence, as if someone picked up the receiver, then said nothing. It freaks me out to this day because it's the one thing I can't explain with reason, and it's the only thing that maintains my belief that there are paranormal forces at work beyond our understanding.
When I was a kid, probably around 6 or 7 years old, I had these night terrors every night. Same nightmare too. One day I asked my parents if I could sleep with them, and they agreed. I couldn't sleep though, and eventually I saw what can only be described as an oily, rainbowish color swirly portal appear from the bedroom window. Out of it came 6 entities that didn't say a word, but rose to the roof and surrounded the bed. They stuck what I can only assume was their hands out and started to circle the bed for 20 minutes or something. I was too terrified to say anything except, "Hello?" But they never responded to me clearly. After 20 minutes, they left through the portal and disappeared. They were kinda translucent, whatever they were. IDK what they were, but I sure as hell know what I saw.
Kind of similar experience. Had a long phase of nightmares when I was 5. 6 years old, that kept returning to the same themes. A mosquito man mutant would be hiding in the bathroom, and when I walked past it, he would come out and take me with him, put me through a portal, which would whisk away on some sort of an assembly line, towards a black pyramid with orange sky. Due to these nightmares, I was sometimes allowed to sleep in my mother's bed. When I did, the dreams would always end the same way. 4 small angels resembling pick-related would hold the corners of the blanket I was laying on and gently drop me through the floors of the apartment building we lived in until I returned and actually woke up. This happened several times and still has a lasting impression on me around 23 years later.
Holy shit, Anons, similar story here. Was 4 or 5 around New Year's 2000. Have had recurring visions of a pitch-black vortex portal with gray swirls in it probably 4 feet in diameter, where the door's upper corner met the wall and ceiling at an angle. On New Year's Eve, I was playing Spyro in my room with the door closed so I could stay up for New Year's. Heard my dad call me for the ball drop. Turn off Spyro and TV, sit on my bed to take my socks off. Out of the portal, a beige-gray-pink slender being with beige-yellow spiny back protrusions with large lidless eyes as black as the void comes out and keeps pacing around my bed. I'm frozen. It never opens its mouth or changes its demeanor, and for some reason, even though I was scared, it seemed like it was more inquisitive of me than threatening. I close my eyes for a good few minutes, and when I open, no being and no portal. Dad opens the door, and he thinks I'm sick and asks me what happened. I told him about the portal and the thing in my room. He checks the windows and sees they're still locked, and we dour our New Year's Eve thing. I've never seen the portal again.
I missed an entire year of my life. When I was 8 years old, I distinctly remember having my birthday and then waking up the next day and having another birthday. I also used to sleepwalk a lot. I would still be mentally conscious. I just wouldn't have control of my motor skills. It was like some force would move me around, and it was terrifying. It would always push me towards my parents' room and then turn around and walk down the stairs to set the alarm off. When I was 20 in college, I had 3 different instances of out-of-body experiences in which I would also lose my motor skills and just be watching myself walk forward.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.